Good evening and welcome to Zoom In on a Fresh Conversation. I am your host, Donna Graybanks. And our guest tonight is author, editor Victoria Kennedy. She is a Baltimore-based writer whose work engages in the complexities of Black love. She has written 2 novels, a short story collection, one of which has been adapted into a stage play. Her work is included in 3 anthologies. Victoria is the founder of Zora's Den, a social support group for Black women writers, and she is one of the editors of the book up for discussion this evening, The Fire Inside, Volume 2. Welcome, Victoria, to Zoom In on a Fresh
Thank you.
Conversation.
Thank you for having me.
Zoom In on a Fresh Conversation is sponsored by Islas Diamonds LLC, the Fresh Book Festival, which will be held in the beautiful city of Daytona Beach. That is coming fast, February 23, 24, 25. And we are very excited. And registration opens up on September 19th, 2022. If you have any questions for Victoria, please leave them in the chat room. This conversation is being recorded. And good evening, Victoria. Please take a moment and give our audience a brief background.
Well, as you said in the bio, I am a Baltimore-based writer. Most of my work is about relationships, usually about Black people. And I write about us because there are so many facets to us, and I don't like for us to be stereotyped. I try to show us loving each other and not always romantically. And so my stories focus on the different kinds of relationships we have and the different ways we love on each other, whether it's destructive, constructive, loving, romantic, like all of the above. It's like, you know, none of us can be just one way, and there are so many facets to us. And it's my pleasure and my honor to write stories about us, especially when it comes to loving us, because it was something that wasn't always allowed. So
Right.
I consider it an honor to be able to do that.
So tell us about that journey. You woke up one morning and said, hey, I want to write a book. So how did all that happen? And you wanted to expound on the fact that there is such thing as Black love. You know, we were separated as slaves and our families were disengaged. And so, you know, having a communal Black relationship was very important. And so why did you decide that that was something you wanted to expound on?
Now, when it comes to being a writer, I think I always was a writer. I just had to experience enough about life in order to take it seriously, to think of it as something I would want to pursue and write about seriously, aside from being a child and writing your childish stories and poems and things like that. Now, originally I wrote about Black love because that was something that I wanted to read myself. But there was an article I read, another writer posted it a couple of years ago, and the title was Black Love is Revolutionary. And it just struck a chord with me, and it broke down like everything about how us loving each other wasn't considered, it was illegal. Like you couldn't marry each other, you couldn't have a relationship, you couldn't build a family, you couldn't bond. And so anytime I could write a story showing us you don't even have to be doing anything special, just being yourself, just living life. And so many times I think opportunities like that are lost, just normalizing Black joy and Black life, just showing us just living life without anything to prove to anyone other than our humanity. And I think that's so important, to just write stories showing that we're human and we're prone to human frailties. We have our flaws like anybody, but we also have a lot of strengths. And that's the reason why we are sitting here right now and we're still standing, because of who came before us. And without them, there will be no us. Right. And I just like to pay homage to what was before us to bring us to where we are now. Even if the stories don't seem as complex as a person would think they would be with that kind of message, normalizing just life as a Black person, being human, is a statement enough. And that's where I'm coming from.
Well, I saw that there were actually 3 books, or whether there's 2 books and a novella.
That I've written?
Yes.
I've written 2 novels,
and
I've been in 3 anthologies. Oh
Because
yeah, and there is a novella. I forgot about it. But
right.
it was originally it was part of an anthology though. It was an
Okay.
anthology that Scylla put out called Still Standing: Stories of Love Over Cancer. And I ended up releasing that later on as a single novella as Time Stood Still. And it has a very powerful message in that story about what happens sometimes when the person standing next to you when crises come and you think they're going to be the person to weather it with you, and they're not the one who's left standing at the end of all that.
Anytime you have a health crisis or any kind of crisis, right? Yeah, it's really, really hard for the person to take care of one another and for the person who has to be taken care of. So
Yes.
I was just confused. I thought, now I see 3 books and I don't.
I had to think for a minute. I was like, wait a minute, yes, I did.
So the one that's kind of like a blueprint, tell us about that. And I
For
can't
my
remember the
stories?
title.
You
Yes.
think for my stories? I would have to take it back to the very first novel.
Right.
And it's
That's what I
the
was
very
thinking.
first thing I'd ever written, and it just came to me out of nowhere. I was on the commute driving home from work, and I saw a billboard that said, "An ounce of prevention." And that was the original title I gave the story. And it's like it just stuck with me. And when I went, because I'm an insomniac, I sleep very little,
Right.
and that's not a good thing.
Yeah, right. It's
It
not.
wouldn't be hard for me to be up till 3:30 in the morning, and I gotta get up at 6:30 to go to work. But so what I started doing with those overnight hours is I started writing. And I was like, if I'm gonna be up anyway, it's better than me just sitting here vegetating in front of the television. Just start writing those things that were coming to me in the story. Like the story, I'm a pantser, so I didn't plot it out. I just wrote it as it came to me. And so that story morphed into Sometimes Love. And I still think, as far as the story itself,
Mm-hmm.
because I think all writers get better with everything they write.
Right.
So I think I'm a better writer now than I was when I first started. But that story is sublime. The story I wrote about, even if I wrote that story over again now, I might write it, I might execute it differently, but the story itself is priceless. I could see it on the screen,
Yeah, yeah,
honestly.
it stands the test of time.
Yeah, I can see that
That
on the
particular
screen.
one, yeah. You might change the comma or the semicolon or whatever, but the
Yeah,
story
exactly.
itself,
But the
right?
story is solid,
Yeah,
exactly. I can
is
see the
solid.
story on the screen.
Yeah, thank you for
Absolutely.
that. That was one of the ones I did read. And
Yeah.
so listen, anthologies, when you're dealing with 57 people, come on.
Ooh, blame it on COVID. Blame it on COVID and being in the house and not being able to interact and go anywhere. And the way the story started pouring in.
Yeah.
And the thing is that we got more poetry than anything the second volume. And
Wow.
the first time it was mostly fiction and nonfiction, but the second time it was poetry. And I don't know if it was because of the immediacy of the emotion.
Mhm.
People were angry, people were afraid. We had a lot of protesting going on during that time. People not knowing where this COVID thing was going. You were watching a death count every night on television.
Every night.
Every night you're watching the numbers tick up, and it's like everybody just felt so vulnerable. And we got it. We got all those emotions submitted in the poetry people sent us. It's like the poetry was amazing, and it was hard to decide which ones couldn't go in and which ones would go in. But how we got to 57, we got to 57 because we had to just cut it. Otherwise, it would have been a dictionary. Because it was more than double what we had in the first one. It's like, how do we justify 57 people?
I know.
And the thing that makes it even bigger is that out of those 57 people, some of those people have more than one piece in the book. So there's like 70 some pieces in the book, but 57 writers. But some of those poets have 3 poems in that book.
Were there duplicates from the first into the second
No,
or
you
no?
mean the writers?
The
Yeah,
writers.
some of the writers were some of some of the writers were duplicates. They were people who were left over from the first issue. Not a lot, maybe 5 who were in the first one. But when we got to the second one, we got people from all over the world who were submitting, and people who, because we are specific and we are about Black women writers. So when we accepted these people from around, we had people who were clearly
Yeah.
not, they were clearly not African American, but they wanted their work in this collection so badly. And that was one of the ways that we had to cut who we had to consider. And by the way, I know that was one of the questions you want to know, like what we learned from doing it. I learned about myself that it was hard for me to reject other people's work because it's hard for me not to look at it as a writer myself and how it feels to be rejected. And so I found myself trying to justify, like, maybe if we just tweak this one little thing, we can keep them, or we can just do this. Like, no, if we did that with all those, we'll have 100 people in here. And so the one thing that helped us out with the second volume is that we enlisted the help of judges.
Okay.
Where in the first one, there were only 2 of us as editors, me, the official editor, on there. And so the second time around, we had all those people. It really helped us to have 4 judges. They were very helpful. They were specialists in each one of the genres. We had people who were poets, fiction writers, memoir writers. And so that really helped us a lot when it came to deciding who would be included, because I tried to really be hard and come up with a system where it had to go through the judges first. And then after it went through the rounds with them, by the time it got to the 2 editors who were working on it, they had already weeded out some of the other, because I told you it was hard for me to say, no, don't throw this one out. We got to use this one. Yeah.
So tell me, was there a format that you sent out? How did you do the call to order? How did you do the call for selection?
We just had it called the fire inside. So whatever the fire inside felt like to you. Sometimes fire can consume.
No, I'm saying, so you got people from all over the world.
Right,
How,
people from all
yeah,
over
so
the world.
I'm saying, how did you market that? So, you know, that submission
we
process.
used social media was our biggest friend. We put the submission out on social media. We also use Submittable, the submission manager, Submittable. So if anyone went searching on Submittable and click on Discover, we would be one of those things that came up that was accepting submissions. And so I think that helped us a lot too, with getting people from all over to submit their stuff. And so we had people from all over the country, people in the Caribbean, Germany, Sweden, I think, you know, we had people from all over who were submitting their work. And it's like, every time it happens, it's just amazing, because it happened the first time too. And it's like, oh, we got this from England. Well, we got this from Barbados, you know, like people who are really feeling what we are trying to communicate, that message of Black sisterhood as writers, and that message of community over competition, you know. So that's what
we call it collaborators, not competitors.
Yes, I like that.
That's exactly what that is. And so, okay, you got people from all over the world. How do you edit?
It was not always easy. Well, I have to say that,
because the language is very, very different. Even though it's all English, it's the way you put it together. Yeah.
It probably helped also that Cynthia Burton Graham was my other, and she was the managing editor in the book this time around. And we both read a lot of work, but in other cultures. And so that probably was really helpful. I know that I read a lot of, I love writing by like Nigerian writers, people for whom English is not always their first language. I love the way they use language. They're very economical with it. They're not very wordy. They only use
They get to the point.
Power, right, exactly. And so that was very helpful in knowing how to get what people were writing about, you know. And we have one writer who's a return writer, and she writes a lot and uses a lot of dialect and uses a lot of phrases that might be from the Yoruba, you know, religion. And so in those things right there, we have to be open-minded when it comes to dialect, because we can't shun that, because that would go against our whole message with Zora Neale Hurston. She wrote strictly in dialect. So we wouldn't be able to say, oh, no, we can't have that because it's not in clear, plain, everyday English. We had to be open-minded and think about multicultural, because even though we're all Black, we're not the same culture. Yeah.
And when we talk about poetry, we talk about love. The way they speak of love is very different than the way we speak of love, right? And so did you find that kind of hard to get used to? Because they're very direct when it comes to love. They really, you know, there's not,
With this collection, the second one especially, the poems were not so much about love as they were about anger and protest. And there was one poem that was very touching because the writer was talking about the absence of someone, like where he should be, and you know, all the things that she would miss with his absence. And I later found out in communicating with that writer, that was her first time submitting, and her husband had been killed in a drive-by shooting some years ago. And it was really a tribute to him. Like, it was talking about acknowledging his absence and all her everyday things that she would normally do. And so different kinds of love, you know, it was not always about romantic. There were some very sweet ones, and some of those loved ones were not very frilly and flowery and very flowery. They were in very simple poetry. The language was very simple and just right to the point, spare enough so that you would still know it's love, but powerful enough to know that they didn't need to use too many words. Like, they knew which words to economize and use in the poetry. So yeah.
When you had to send out the rejection letter.
Well, most of the rejections were not sent by me. They went through the judges first, but there were some that ended up on the maybe list that had to be, because we did have some maybes who were very close to going either way. And some of them, sometimes you wanted to accept, but there were things that would take too long to fix. If we had had more time, I probably would have extended that courtesy to some of the writers to fix some of the things that could be fixed and still make it in the book. But it might have been too extensive for them to revise it in order for it to make the cut.
So will there be a volume 3, the aftermath?
There definitely will be. Well, actually, I want to make the anthology a regular thing. It might not always be the fire inside, but it might not always be the fire inside, but I want that to be, that's like my love letter to Black women writers, because for so many of them, this is their first time ever being published. In anthologies. Some of them have never been published. And I just love offering that platform so that they may never be published again, or it might give them enough nerve to submit somewhere else to see if they'll be published. But I just love offering that opportunity for them to see their name in print, to see their words, and to be validated that their stories mean something, and that they are acknowledged by someone even outside of our community. You know, you might have an ally who really appreciates what we're doing and what we're writing, and it does something to feed them too. Yeah, that's the way I feel about it. I had one person who submitted 2 things. I have to tell you this example, it's so cute. She submitted 2 things and one of them was rejected. So she didn't realize that her second thing had been accepted. And I didn't get a response back from her email. So I called her, and she's like, I asked her, because she was local, and I asked her, could she be present at a reading that was coming up? And she was like, she was quiet, and she was like, well, it was my understanding that I was rejected. And I said, one of your pieces was rejected, but the other one was accepted. She was like, it's accepted? And I said, yeah. So she's yelling in the background to her husband, baby, I'm gonna be published. So she thought that all of her work was cut out, but only one of them was rejected and the other one was, and so it's little things like that that let me know that it's worth it to be that for somebody else, to offer them an opportunity they didn't have before, or who might be intimidated about submitting somewhere if they don't have all the credentials or they don't have the long resume of work that another better known writer might have. And so, yeah, let them know that their writing counts too, because we like to promote writers of all different levels of accomplishment.
Tell me about the cover.
That's another thing that I really love.
Do you have a copy of it so they can see right there?
I
No?
don't have a copy. Can you believe
Okay.
I don't have a copy right here in my hand?
Mama Tony, you got a copy? She really has a copy of it.
And each cover, I want to have original artwork on the cover. And so the very first one had a painting on it that was original, that was actually painted by my brother. He's a painter. And so he painted the cover to the first one. We used one of his images. And then I said, well, when we were looking for artists whose work to ask for the cover for the second one, I was like, if the stories are going to be Black women writers, how about we go for Black women artists?
Nice.
On the cover. And so Jewel Ham is the artist who created the painting on the front. I went to one of her shows, and when I saw her work, I was blown away. When I reached out to her, and she didn't even hesitate, she was like, absolutely, can I suggest this one right here? And that's the one she suggested. She said, if not, you can look through my work and pick anything, but this is the one I'm going to suggest. And it was perfect.
What did it say to you?
The relief. It's a woman reclining in a chair. She's smoking a cigarette, and it just goes against the grain, because I know that's not like everybody's thing, but it was like an unwinding and just blowing off steam. And then where there's smoke, there's fire. So if it's the fire inside and she's blowing off the smoke, it's like a subliminal thing that maybe this person might be a fiery person who's letting off some steam. But yeah, and I love
I've had some
red.
people, yeah, I've had some people ask about the photo, I mean, the picture. So if she has copies, you might want to send me her address, because people are really like the cover.
Well, I'll reach out to her. Name is Jewel Ham.
Yeah.
And her work is amazing. You'll see her work on Instagram as well.
Right.
Beautiful, beautiful work. But
she's from Baltimore? She's from Baltimore?
No, she's not from Baltimore. I met her in Baltimore at an art show, but she's not from Baltimore.
We do.
Went to Howard. I think she went to Howard, but she's not from Baltimore though.
We do an emerging artist series here at the museum. And so we do 5 a year. And so I wanted to put hers in the selection process. I don't know if she'll win,
that
but
would be awesome.
Yeah. I really love the cover. Yeah, I really love the cover. And I wasn't sure that it was an original piece. So I'm glad that you were able to tell me.
Oh, there's someone that's showing, but it skipped to the next screen, Stella.
What's wrong?
She was showing the cover on her screen.
Oh, that's great. Okay. Let me go to full view then, so everybody can see
one of the writers.
Let's see it, Stella. Your full screen now.
Writers just did an unpackaging. I sent her contributor's copy of the book. So she did a whole unpacking and showed the cover on her reel with the music playing in the background.
Oh, nice.
It's Ray Chesney, and her piece opens the collection. Her piece opens the collection. When Zora Rises is the name of the poem.
So tell me why it's Zora's Den.
Oh,
I live in Florida, and we are all about Zora Neale Hurston.
I'm a lover of Zora Neale Hurston.
Yeah.
And I have been since I had to do a paper on her in college, and really found out about her life and fell in love with the story. Thank you, Stella. And fell in love with the story of how Alice Walker revived her career posthumously.
Yes.
How she went looking for her grave and just awakened all this new interest in her stuff that had become basically obsolete. People were not reading her work, and now it's almost like a whole revival of everything Zora. You have so many groups named after Zora Neale Hurston, magazines named after Zora Neale Hurston, and everybody just loving Zora. And she was always spunky. She always had.
She was always a prolific writer, always.
Yes, and she was always going against the grain. And You know, a lot of writers of her day did not always give her props because they thought she was dumbing down the language by writing in dialect, but she was more authentic than a lot of people gave her credit for then. Now, so many people love her. And we also had the honor of her niece writing the foreword for the first volume, Lucy Ann Hurston. She wrote the foreword to the first one. And one of the writers who was included knew her and told her the project we were working on. I was on my way to work one day and she was like, let me know you have time for a chat. And I was like, okay. She said, I have something that's going to make your day. And I was like, okay. When I called her, I pulled up on the parking lot at work. And when I called her, she's like, Zora's niece wants to be involved in your project. I was like, Zora who? She said, Zora Neale Hurston's niece. And I was like, wow, you're right. It made my day. It absolutely made, and Miss Lucy Ann Hurston is a sweetheart.
Maurice said that she was very good friends with Langston Hughes.
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
yes.
they did a lot.
Zora, and then they had their little falling out over their play. Both of them wanted to be the leader. Yes, both wanted to be the leader.
Oh, Zora's brother lived in the next block from me in Sanford, Florida. Wow, that's
awesome.
That's from Patricia. Yeah. She's
awesome.
a mega hero here in the state of Florida. So we
I'm sure.
celebrate her every chance we get.
I can just imagine.
So while you were editing the volumes, this is we're going to go back to that. What else did you learn besides the fact that you hate rejecting people?
I hated rejecting people. What I learned other than that was how important it is for teamwork. That's one thing. For teamwork, you have to have your team in place, because if you don't, it slows down the process. It slows down, you know, how streamlined everything could be if you don't have everything and everyone in place. And I had to learn that because I'm a writer. I'm used to working solo.
Right.
And I never really had worn the editor's hat before, because I'm always coming up with these grand ideas. And it's the same way we started our reading series. Zora's Den has a reading series every month in Baltimore. It's usually the third Thursday of the month. And we have 4 Black women writers come together and read their work. And so we're on hiatus until September. But when we start back, we have usually a poet, fiction writer, a memoir writer, and then a toss-up between the last one. But we have a reading in person every month. And so I come up with these grand ideas like, oh, we should have a reading. Like if I go to one too many and don't see enough of us, and it's like, we should have a reading with just all Black women. They'd be like, oh yeah, that's good. But then the real work kicks in. It's like,
right. Because it's your idea, and then you have to put it together.
It's like, then the real work kicks in. It's like, okay, who's going to be booking these people? Who's going to call them? Like, where are we going to get the writers from? Because after a while, when it's first moving along quickly, after a while it starts slowing down. It's like, do we recycle some of the readers or writers? Like, where do we get new writers from? So always make it a point to attend a lot of readings. I attend readings. That's how I meet people. And I'm not, I don't have a problem with reaching out to people I don't know. And
you do know Sharon Lucas, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah, because she's a good contact.
Yes, absolutely. And so some of the people from her area have read for Zora's Den. They've come over to Baltimore, people from the DC area, some really great writers. And so it's the same way with the anthology. When I came up with that idea, I think I probably had seen so many people coming out with anthologies. And I was like, ooh, Zora's Den could do an anthology. And I just didn't realize, you know, how much it was going to take. The first one was really trying. But
how many people did
you
have in the first one?
There were 26.
Okay, so you doubled.
Now it jumped to 57, right? That's a lot. So I think the next time around, we'll probably have a cap. Like we'll cap it off at a certain number of authors just to make it not too taxing on those of us who are putting it together, because it really can wear you down, especially if you're working a 9 to 5. Like right. Some of us are still working 9 to 5s. Most of us are not just writers or just editors for a living. We're doing other things And then with me, I was doing my 9 to 5 and then doing that and then not having a lot of time left over to do my own writing, to work on my own work. And so right now I'm loving being able to read recreationally. Like I'm reading, I'm just absorbing as I'm going from one
Oh,
work
I
to another.
know. I know. I just
And it's
finished the
like,
book the other day and I thought, oh, that was so nice to have a time to do it. Yeah.
yes, exactly. So I'm
Were you
doing
an
that.
editor before you were a writer, or were you a writer
No,
and then became an editor? Okay, go ahead.
I became an editor with the very first, other than other other than other than workshops,
Okay.
other than workshopping, because the grad program I was in, you do your writing workshops. You know, you had to, that's where you had to learn how to get a thick skin, to be able to take criticism. You had to be honest in telling people what worked and what did not work, and being mindful of telling them all the good things first before you start shooting down all their
Right, right.
things, because people are sensitive. It's their work, that's their baby, they're vulnerable, that's part of them. They're sharing with you on the page. So yeah, I think it's very important to mind how you criticize another artist's work. And so that's one of my biggest challenges, because
Yeah,
you're not doing them a favor by not being real.
right.
You know, so you have to be truthful, but you have to be tactful in the way you deliver that news. To me, that's how I feel. And it
Can we
might be
talk,
personal because I'm a writer.
right. Can we talk about for, seasoned authors and our new emerging authors, how important it is to have it edited? Now, we back in the day, uh,
Mhm.
you know, had a hard time even getting published, right?
Right.
And when we did, we paid for editing, but it wasn't
Mhm.
done very well, right?
Right.
And so, but tell us, and to the young and to the seasoned, how
Mhm.
important an edited project is.
Oh, it makes all the difference. It really does, because some people are able to self-edit. I don't know a whole lot of them who can do it very well, but
No.
you do have some people who can self-edit. But when you keep looking at the same thing over and over again, there are going to be some things you miss unless you put it aside and you come back to it. And they have a lot of different software that can catch a lot of grammatical things and all, but I just think it adds a certain polish when you get someone who does that and that's their job. They're looking for things that you might not look at. I know there are different kinds of editors and all that, but having someone give it a look who's used to looking for specific things to not have too much of or too little of, or catch things that are repetitive that you may not be aware that you're repeating. Because I know that there's like this phrase I use that comes out in all of my writing. And now that I know it, that I look for it and I have to laugh because I say it in just about everything. So it's like now I have to cut it because it's going to become like this, like a joke, like to look for it in all of my stories. And so, yeah, it's very important, because then you have somebody who has to go over the grammar. After you have someone who edits it for the story flow and the things that you're repeating, you have to have somebody to look over it for your grammar and your punctuation and proofreading. So it all depends on how polished, how important it is to you for your work to be polished. And that's subjective. Some writers may not be that stuck on it because
Right.
they know they have a really good story and they're going to find an audience who's going to read it because they love that really good story that's going to captivate them. But for other, I'm a Virgo. I'm a perfectionist. And I know not everyone's into astrology, but I'm a perfectionist. And when it comes to that,
Yes,
it's hard
you
for
are.
me. Yeah, it's hard for me to accept a mistake if I know I did everything to not make one. And
Right.
nobody's perfect, so everybody's going to make some mistake. But yeah, I'm kind of a perfectionist. So by the time an editor gets it, I've combed over that thing so many times, you know. So when they find things that I missed, I love it.
Right.
Absolutely.
Because you have done the due diligence to get it done.
Mhm, mhm,
The
mhm.
other thing I want on them, this is just a sidebar, is that when you go to some of these publishing houses, they send your work overseas, right, to
Hmm.
be edited, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
there's a language barrier.
Yes. There's a
right.
difference.
And there's a there's a big difference. And so I want to tell everyone how important it is to kind of keep it on this side of the water so that it can be done and done well, right?
Yes, yes.
So
I
the
agree.
next anthology, I know you don't even want to think about it, but when do you think you'll start it again? The first of the year? I don't know.
I'm thinking, because this one just came out this summer, I'm definitely going to wait till the beginning of the year to decide when to open submissions, because the last time I opened submissions, it was around March, April. So maybe then is when we'll open submissions. That's what, once I have my team in place, because I want to have it even tighter. Like, that's one thing I learned. Each time it gets better. What I learned to do better the next time, I learned to do even better the next time. So what we didn't get right the second time, I want to get even better the third time. So maybe springtime.
And what will be the subject? Do you know?
No, we know. Oh, that's one thing I didn't get to answer when you asked me
Right.
before.
Yeah.
We let the work dictate what the theme is. So if we see a recurring theme in the work, then that becomes the central message. If we see a lot of work starting to repeat the same kind of message, and that's one thing that Cynthia, my co-editor, she's really good at creating a flow, like starting with one thing and let that build to something else and build to another thing. And it's like, it becomes like the next perfect thing. Like the thing you're reading after that is like it's almost like a playlist, but in stories and poems.
So she kind of laid it out.
Yes.
By feeling or by,
yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yes, she is
And
very good at that.
yeah, oh man,
Yeah,
how do you
so
market 57 people? And what kind of marketing strategy do you give them?
the writers,
Yes.
well, a lot of those writers, let me tell you, it starts off slowly, very organically, and not always the best it can be. So we're learning our way as we go along. And a lot of those writers who are used to marketing there, because we have some of these writers who are professors, some of them who are seasoned writers who've been out there, and some who may only been writing in a notebook for the past 5 years.
Right.
So sometimes they come together and create their own marketing events. They may do a release party, or they get together in their cities. Because someone reached out to me for the writers in there who are from Michigan. There were a couple from Detroit, a couple from other parts of Michigan. And so last I heard, they were planning to do something together. So I'm looking forward to what happens with that. But let me tell you, social media has been our best friend.
Yeah. Yeah. Really
Especially in
done.
the age of COVID, because a lot
Right.
of people aren't gathering in person. So social media has been our friend.
I think social media is still your friend.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it still works
Absolutely.
very, very well.
Even operating, with COVID, because we are going to have to learn how to live with it. And so we'll be able to opt to meet in person and virtually.
So tell our audience, please, how to get copies of the book. And if you want to give us any more information about yourself, I know we spoke more about the anthologies. I know you have a very well done website that you could send people to.
Yes,
So
please go to zorasden.com if you want to see what we're about. And the books in paperback and ebook are available on Amazon right now. And any announcements for anything new coming would definitely be on the website. And you should definitely check it out. As for me, I'm working on revising some of my old stuff that never got published. I had a piece that was a serial on a now defunct blog, which will be a novel very soon. It'll be a novel very soon. And I'm working on my first urban fantasy novel.
Oh, nice. Yeah. It's nice to write in other genres. I haven't gotten there yet, but
because I love to read it. I love to read it. So I said I have to try my hand. Yes.
And Scylla, thank you very much for the introduction, because we are collaborators, not
Yes,
competitors.
yes. Thank you, Scylla.
So thank you so much. We asked each of our guests to give us a pearl of wisdom. And if you would do that now, that appreciate that.
Let me see. I was jotting something down. Let me see. Oh, yes, absolutely. If there's a goal you've been pursuing and you've been putting it aside, pick it back up, because the dreams don't become old. It's like we allow them to get old in our minds, but the dreams can be renewed. You can always go back and pick them up, even if they've changed a little bit, and don't put an age limit on your dreams.
No,
If I had done that, I wouldn't be writing, and I wouldn't be putting out anthologies if I allowed
57 authors.
right to
That's
be
right.
dictated by my age.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's wonderful. Don't let your age deter your dreams.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Victoria. And to our audience, why write an anthology? It fulfills the purpose of giving back. In other words, writing for a worthy cause. Writing an anthology is a fabulous way to fulfill this purpose. It gives writers a way to educate and publicly create. It also builds creative and supportive relationships with other authors. So when the call comes out in January, make sure that you answer the call to Victoria and Zora's Den to be part of the next anthology, which will be volume 3. I thank you all for being here tonight, every Monday night. I know that you could be 1,000 other places, and I do appreciate your time. And Victoria, thank you very much. And we'll see everybody again Monday night. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Good night. It goes up on YouTube in 20 minutes.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
You're welcome.